Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. With your hosts, Drew and Daniela. Take our hands and let's walk this journey together. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Meaningful Hearts podcast. Today, we are going to discuss Headspace. We're not talking about an application that's on your phone. You have plenty of mobile applications like Candy Crush and all that other stuff. But today, Daniela loves Candy Crush.
I do. I recently started playing. Yeah, but Headspace is an app that exists for meditation, breathing, and all that stuff. And that's not what we're talking about today.
What we're talking about is our mind state, where we are in a point of our day or in our thought process, and how, if we're not in the right headspace, maybe a person we're speaking to or talking with might not be able to get most of our attention, or might not get the best of us out of the conversation. Daniela?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the right headspace, but a different headspace. I think it'll be better understood if we explained what happened, because this episode was actually inspired by a conversation that you and I had the other day. So I think it'll be helpful if you share your viewpoint of what was happening, and then I'll share my viewpoint and how that played out during our conversation and how that ultimately inspired this thought.
Well, we were just having a conversation after a long day. We didn't speak on the phone the other day. So it was more or less like a conversation of our days as a whole. And I was not really feeling the best, or maybe I was looking at the negative aspects of my day as opposed to seeing the wins. I was seeing more of the challenges ahead and not being appreciative. I guess I was just having a bad go of it. And Daniela was coming from a great day. She was having an awesome day. And I guess me explaining what was going on in my head, I guess my stresses over finances and maybe small breakthroughs financially, but they weren't necessarily big to me, or they created more hurdles, which I kind of sounded a little sour about. And she's like, what are you saying? Like, that doesn't sound like bad. That sounds good. Like, I guess in a sense, I was feeling so poorly or bad about what I was feeling in my head that I couldn't even see the highlights, and I was sounding a little bitter. And she was, coming from a positive mind state, was feeling more like she was pulling out the positive in my day and seeing the good in it. And I guess it was kind of like we were on two different wavelengths at that point, or I was in a different headspace than her. It kind of brought her energy down too. Is that kind of a gist of how it went?
Yes, from your perspective, yes, and a little bit of mine too. But yes, just to reiterate a little bit, Drew wasn't having the best day. You know, we all tend to get in our head sometimes, and he was having one of those days where he was a little bit more stressed, a little bit more worried, a little bit more concerned, and it's natural. You know, in the current state of the economy, finances is a difficult topic of conversation. I, on the other hand, had a good day versus the day before I hadn't had the best day. So when Drew and I sat down to have a conversation on the phone, you know, he was talking about some news that he received, and I was like, wow, like, that's such good news. And in his mind, he was like, yes, but I'm worried about this, and that. And I was like, damn, like, that's a little bit of a buzzkill. And it was in this conversation that I actually realized that while being in a positive headspace is helpful, there are times when it is not, because I realized that what I ended up doing throughout the conversation was also invalidating how he was feeling, because I was only seeing like the bright side, almost like I was negating the worries. And it was actually in that conversation that I had that realization, like, wow, you and I are in two different headspaces right now. You're seeing it from a place of concern and worry, and I'm seeing it from a place of like okay, you've got stressors, but you've also received some really good news. And like I said earlier, it was because of this conversation and this realization that I thought it would be a good question to pose to our listeners. What kind of headspace am I in right now when you're interacting not just with an intimate partner, but just with people in general? Because it's really going to affect your response. Now, if I had been in a different headspace, if I had been also experiencing worries, or if I had had a long day at work, or if I was tired, or if I just wasn't feeling good, I might have been in a better position to relate to Drew's experience. Maybe not, though, because misery loves company. So we could have fed off each other's worries and it could have really spiraled from there. Same thing, vice versa. If Drew was in a positive state and I was in a positive state, we might have overlooked things that we should be concerned about. There's extremes to things, right? There's too much, there is such a thing as toxic positivity, I think it's the term, where it's not the right time, not the right moment. So things could go either way. So again, what better way than to think about what kind of headspace you're in when you're in certain conversations, asking yourself, how is my current headspace affecting my outlook on what this person is saying? I thought that those were really good questions to share with our listeners, because it always comes back to how to build a more meaningful relationship. Now, I know for me, I'm going to make a more conscious effort to be mindful of the headspace that I'm in versus the headspace that Drew is in. And I think I said it during our conversation. I think we're in different headspaces right now. So the best thing that I can do for you is just listen, because the feedback that I'm going to give you is, or may not be, as comforting, or it may not be what you're looking for.
Yeah. I think also, just I guess maybe a side note, a lot of couples find themselves in I guess unsafe waters when they're trying to be there for their partner, but then it becomes almost like an attack or an argument, and then it becomes defensiveness, right, on both sides. And I think it's important to say, well, things aren't running smoothly here, and I feel like there's a little resistance, or maybe you're getting a little upset with me in regards to the way I'm responding. Let me figure out a way to be supportive of you, because in the end of the day, we're trying to come to a resolution here. We're not trying to win. Nobody's trying to win. It's not an argument. It's really just, I want to be here for you, and I want to figure out the best way to do it. Let me try a different approach. And really appreciative of having a partner that can do that. And I think that's something that's so hard to do, because people always make it about themselves instead of about the other person. So I just wanted to say that.
So it sounds like not only figuring out what kind of headspace the person is in, or the listener, but also how to respond accordingly, and knowing how can I best respond to this situation right now instead of allowing myself to get defensive. Do you feel, we may not have talked about this. This is live on the air right now.
Uh-oh.
Did you feel you were getting a little defensive when we were having that conversation the other day?
Maybe a little bit, but it was more like I was getting irritable. I was a little irritable, getting irritated. And it's like almost as if sometimes it's like, why can't you see what I see and feel what I feel and understand it a little bit? But it's not like I want you to, because then you wouldn't be able to pull me out of it, right? Or be able to be supportive. It's just my frustration about what was going on. And that's what I got a little irritated. But like I said, we walked away from that conversation. I was thankful and I was appreciative. It was just that I was in a bad space. So I was having a hard time of it. It's like when, you're just not in the headspace to hear those things, you might react, or you might say, or be a little defensive by default, I would say. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, in turn, for me, it was a bit of like a buzzkill on my mood. And I think you pointed that out, like you didn't. And I think sometimes when that happens, I know that for you, it's not a good feeling, because you're putting a damper on my mood. And then we have like that back and forth of like, it's okay, like it's bound to happen. And I don't think that there's enough of that in disagreements or moments when you're in different headspaces, and not just with partners, but with friendships too, and any type of relationship where, I remember saying to you, it's not going to change how I feel about you. Just recognize that I'm a little upset right now. You're a little upset right now. So the best thing that we can do is just acknowledge that the both of us are upset, that this conversation, it's taken a little bit of a different track, and we need to kind of redirect and know that the feelings are not here forever. They will pass. And I think couples struggle with conflict resolution because of that, because they fall into that trap of, you're just not getting it. And I'm going to stick with my point. You're not seeing my point of view. And I'm going to stick with my feelings, as opposed to compromising a little bit and recognizing this is something that we've also said before. It's not you versus me. It's you and me versus whatever problem is at hand.
Yeah. I think also a lot of couples, one argument can make or break their relationship. It's like, you don't understand me. You don't get me. You know what? I'm done. Or they hang up the phone, or it's like the relationship gets put on pause until further notice. Yeah. And it's like, that's a lot of relationships. I've seen that so often in observing people around me, people that I know, that literally a conversation or a disagreement turns to the relationship being literally put on ice. It's or thin ice or whatever. It's like, whoa.
I think that those types of situations come from stuff that we've also talked about, unresolved conflict from before. That's why I make it a point. I know you and I kind of joke about this sometimes, but when we have a disagreement, or when I get upset or when you get upset, I think you adapted this habit from me, actually, because I realized that you started to say it more when I was saying it, when I will say, hey, like, it doesn't make me love you any less. I don't see you as a different person. Now I've actually realized in this moment that you've started to say that, more often.
I think,
or not more often, just when we have disagreements.
If you are able to use it with your heart and mind and with the best intentions, it's good to adapt that and communicate it back to the person that uses it, because it might be an easier way for them to feel soothed, feel better.
I would say soothe.
I know, I'm just being a jerk.
Soothe.
But I guess that in a sense, you mirror the language that somebody uses with you that you actually like, and it's like, well, let me mirror that back. We use a lot of sayings and things together that becomes part of our relationship language, I guess. And it's in our vocabulary. It's kind of like easy to say, okay, just so you know, this is where it's coming from. Yeah. And I love that. I
definitely agree. We started off with just one point in this episode, but in having the conversation with you, it actually sounds like there's a few points that our listeners can take away. The first thing is asking yourself, what headspace am I in when somebody's talking to you? Because your perception is bound to change depending on the headspace that you're in. And when you are in different headspaces, how are you going to respond? How are you going to best be supportive? And then the other part, at least from what I'm taking away from it, is the last bit that we were just talking about, knowing how to have conflict resolution, in the sense that one disagreement or somebody being in a different headspace than you, how that's going to affect your relationship. If it's going to make or break your relationship, there needs to be some evaluation going on of your relationship itself, and keeping those things in mind. I think those are like the three main things that I'm reflecting on our conversation right now. Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, I also think that just because you're in a great mood does not mean everybody else has to be in a good mood around you. I think that's the thing too. It's like you come home and you're feeling this fire and the other person's not, and you get upset. Some people get upset with that person because how can you not feel the fire that I'm under? I'm like, I just won the championship. You should feel that too. And that person's just not. And you resent them for not feeling that. It's like, doesn't mean everybody has a great day all the time, and it doesn't happen all at once. When we both have a great day, it's amazing. But you also have to be able to respect that not everybody's going to be in that headspace, and you can't be upset with them for that. I mean, you could get frustrated, I guess, if it happens so often and you're constantly getting, I guess your sunlight drained from you,
Yeah.
that's a different story. I think that then you also have to backtrack and see what your relationship is built on, and see where the communication is missing. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
it's all linked together.
Yeah. I
Um,
can certainly say that there are moments where I'm in a really good mood and you're not in the best mood. And I'm like, damn, that's a little bit of a buzzkill, but I'm not mad at you for it. I'm just like,
no,
damn, like that sucks. I respect your space and you also respect mine, because I know
yes,
that between you and I, you try to be in a better headspace when that's happening. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it does, great. When it doesn't, also okay. We just know to give each other maybe a little bit of space, maybe a little bit of time to process the way that we're feeling.
yes, and we walk away not resenting the person for getting that
Mm-hmm.
space. Like, babe, listen, if do your things, you don't, just take your time out, and we'll circle back, and that's it. I know she has her time, and she'll circle back to me, and we'll talk, and and she'll appreciate me in return for giving her that space and time to just kind of chill. And that's okay. You don't get upset with your partner because they want time alone to their minds, their brains. We have to check in with ourselves first before we can vibe with somebody else and speak with them. It's very healthy. It's not, and you cannot make it about yourself. It's not like, oh, this person, they're upset with me because they're not talking. It has nothing to do with that. I I had a personal encounter with somebody that I know, that their significant other was upset with them because they didn't speak with them for 3 days. That's a miscommunication. But when they finally saw that person, instead of saying, "How are you doing?" Like, let me talk. Whatever it is, if you don't want to talk, I understand. But more like, you're not going to talk to me? You're really not going to talk to me? Like, are you serious? Like, how can you not go and talk to me? Just tell me what's wrong. Uh, is, is it me? Did I do something? It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, you gotta
I
stop.
mean, in that case, going 3 days without talking to
Yes,
somebody,
but sometimes, but when it's out of the ordinary and it's not a normal occurrence, and somebody is acting in a way that you've never seen, and it is a little scary, sometimes people crack a little bit, and you got to like step back and say, okay, well, I am going to protect myself and make sure, hey, I'm not the asshole in this situation, but I'm going to give you your space. And if you come around, you come around. And if you don't, then I don't know. I don't know. I guess our relationship doesn't matter, to an extent, because in reality, you do have to communicate with somebody sometime. I was just
yes,
saying
I
that,
would say that if you're not going to talk to somebody for 3 days, at least give them a heads up.
yeah, but sometimes the approach is, did something happen so terribly that you just couldn't speak? Because
No, I get what you're saying. You're
yeah,
saying that it's more of a not taking it, that it's not always so personal. Just like
yes,
when you were upset the other day, it wasn't a personal thing towards me. It was just what you were going through.
yeah, I gave an
And I think
extreme.
that, yeah, yes, that was an extreme. Smaller instances.
I
But yeah,
I get a little carried away sometimes.
yes, I know. Anyway, with that being said, again, 3 points to ask yourself, how different is the headspace that you're in versus the other party? How can you best support that person? And what kind of relationship do you have with that person, that whatever you're, the different headspaces that you're in, is not going to make or break the relationship. It's not going to make me care about you any less. Like, I respect you. I'm here for
Yeah.
you. Let's just figure it out. I think those are the three main things to take away. If you take other things away, great though. That's awesome from
If you have
listening to
something to
Drew and I
add,
ramble.
if you have something to add, that'd be awesome too. We're always looking to learn, maybe see it from
For sure.
a different area that we didn't see it in. We came to
Yeah.
some of these conclusions as we were speaking about it, and it also piggybacks off of our other relationship talks and things of that nature. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you know what those things are. Well, Daniela, would you like to sum up anything else? Is there anything else you'd like to tell the community? Is there another value bomb that you want to drop?
I don't know. I think it's just, thinking about Headspace, it was such an enlightening moment for me, even though it's things that we already kind of apply. I thought, it's a really good question, because we're not always aware of how different our headspaces compared to others, how they affect our relationships. And again, not just your romantic relationships, but your relationships as a whole. whether it's that friendships, colleagues, teachers, mentors, family, these things also apply. And I think if we are able to be more conscious of our own headspaces, we can learn how to better respond, which ultimately means that we can build more meaningful relationships, which in turn, more meaningful lives, which is the whole premise of our podcast. So that's my value bomb. Doing a little dance.
We appreciate you all for tuning in and listening. We hope that you have an amazing day or night wherever you are.